Welcome back, friends, to episode 197 of our Thrive and Aligned Healing podcast. And today we're talking about my hormones are imbalanced. What do I do? Hey, I have a lot of folks who come to me, and that is their primary concern is that their hormones are out of balance. And sometimes we don't get a lot of qualifiers because we don't quite understand what that means, right? Oftentimes when people say, "Oh, I feel like my hormones are out of balance," it's a list of symptoms. And sometimes those symptoms we experience, but we didn't recognize we experienced them until we watched social media or we saw a TikTok or something and it put names to those symptoms. Right. And sometimes folks have already gone into like a primary care provider looking for like to get their hormones tested to even see where their hormones are. And sometimes they're met with a little bit of pushback. I've had people come in and tell me, oh, my provider told me that there aren't labs you can run for hormones, and just flat out said, nope, I can't do that for you. There are some folks who went to their doctor and the doctor did run labs for hormones, and they came back and said, your hormones, your labs look fantastic. I'm not sure. Yeah, it's not your hormones. And yet people still don't feel well, right? Those symptoms that often fall under this, my hormones are imbalanced, can kind of run the gamut, anywhere from things like hair loss, hair thinning, to brain fog or memory changes, right? Sometimes it's feeling older than we are, right? Where we feel like 10, 20 years older than we are. Sometimes it's like our achy joints, achy muscle stiffness. Sometimes it's that fatigue where we're exhausted. We find ourselves pushing through day after day because there are things that still need to get done, right? But they don't quite have the energy to feel vibrant, to feel refreshed. Sometimes we have changes in our sleep patterns, things like insomnia, or maybe we are exhausted and like we fall asleep as soon as our head hits the pillow, but we might wake up in the middle of the night and then we can't go back to sleep. You wake up and your mind is on, right? And it's hard to turn our mind off. Um, Sometimes we can see things like hot flashes or night sweats. And we may be perimenopausal. We might be between the ages of 40 and 50. And sometimes that's not even the case. Sometimes I have women in their 20s getting hot flashes, or women in their 60s who've already been through menopause, and now we're getting hot flashes again. Right? Our body's trying to tell us something when those things happen. Sometimes our hormone balance includes our cycles, where sometimes we don't have a cycle for several months, or we might have multiple cycles in 1 month, right? All of those are indicators that something is out of balance. And when we talk about hormones, I like to inform people that it's not just our sex hormones like our estrogens and our testosterone. Those are big players because those are the ones we kind of hear about the most or we think we know the most about. But it's also our progesterone hormone, it's also our cortisol, our stress hormone, and our thyroid hormone, even our insulin hormone. All of these play together. They're all part of what we call the endocrine system to help to support our energy, to help to support our memory, to help to support our sleep, to help to support our cycles and like our circadian rhythms, how our menstrual cycles are occurring, right? Whether they're occurring regularly on time or whether they're irregular. All of these key pieces or all these key hormones play together to work towards optimal health, right? And so we can experience those symptoms with either just one hormone out of balance or even with like multiple hormones out of a balance. And when we talk about hormones, I think it's important to understand that relationship. We go into quite a lot of depth in understanding those different hormones because a lot of people may think, like, oh, my hair loss and hair thinning, people think that's associated with our thyroid hormone, but it can also be associated with our cortisol hormone and our progesterone deficiencies. And things like weight, right? If we're trying to lose weight and we can't lose weight, some people think that that's a thyroid hormone issue and will ask for their thyroid to get tested. But that could also be a cortisol stress hormone issue or a testosterone issue. So it's not always clear and black and white when we talk about hormone imbalances. It takes a little bit of exploring and trying to kind of dig a little deeper, whether that's with labs or sometimes based on our symptoms, to try and figure out, yeah, which is the hormone that needs the priority, that needs the support. And sometimes when we also talk about hormone imbalances, people will make an assumption that our hormones are too low, that it's a hormone deficiency. And that's not always the case either. Sometimes our hormone balance can be a an excess of a certain hormone. Like our body's either making too much estrogen or making too much cortisol, or thyroid or even testosterone, or that our body's not metabolizing those hormones efficiently. So when we talk about this imbalance, it's not always just, oh, well, we're deficient. What can I add, right, to balance my hormones? And this is where sometimes that labs can be helpful. It's understanding, well, we could also have an excess of hormones somewhere, and things are not getting cleared or metabolized appropriately, and that is what's creating some of the symptoms we experience.
Yeah, I think that especially now with TikTok and more awareness of around perimenopause, menopause, that women are becoming more empowered around when we get these labs back and they're like, oh yeah, you're all in normal range. Because I think women have been gaslit for decades, centuries perhaps, around, they go to their gynecologist. That's a whole nother podcast episode that I could riff on with gynecologists, but I'm not going to. We go to our gynecologist, we get these labs, and they're like, yeah, you're all in normal range. And then these women are like, but I don't feel right. Like something's wrong, right? But then they're gaslit. It's like, well, maybe you need some antidepressants or anti-anxiety meds, right? And that's like their like go-to because your labs look normal, so this must be a mental health thing and your perception of reality thing. And they continue to suffer. And I was reading a book too that was talking about like how women are prescribed at such a high rate antidepressants and anti-anxiety meds
Yeah.
for things that are actually real things. Like real, like she was right the whole time that her hormones were off and no one was listening, right? And I think it's so unfortunate because there's generations of mothers that wanted to show up to the best of their ability, but because they were struggling hormonally, it impacts their mental health, right? Like it impacts the whole family system. Like you see divorce rates are so high around 40s and 50s, right? Where she's struggling. And I think there's also the component of like, I know for me, I think you're 45, right? And I'm
Yes.
44. Like your ability to give a fuck does decline. And I'm not sure if it's like hormones or if you're just like, we're just in a new, like we've lived enough life at this point that we are like, I just don't care what you think anymore. Um, but yeah, it gets super blurry and we get gaslit so much. So I do think that this is an issue. And I think there's a lot of women out there that do believe like there is something off, but they just don't know what do I do?
Right.
What am I supposed to do? I've done the labs and you've told me the labs are fine. The next line of defense is either putting me on anti-anxiety, antidepressants, or giving me testosterone pellets just as a blanket response. And like I think a lot of women are not happy with these recommendations.
I think you're exactly right. And I would encourage them not to be happy with those recommendations and to seek further help. What I will add is that oftentimes when conventional medicine does labs on hormones, one, there's such a broad range and they're not doing any calculations, right? They're just looking, and as long as it didn't get flagged, they don't really know what to do with that information, right? So I do have folks who I ask them to bring in their labs and let's go over them. What day in their cycle did their labs get drawn, right? That makes a difference since our cycles, our hormones are cyclical and they change throughout the month. We do estrogen and progesterone ratios, right? So we can actually see what does that hormone mean? How is it functioning in the body? And is it within optimal levels? Now, if people haven't had hormones done, right, there are different types of naturopathic or functional medicine type testing where we look at like saliva and urine for hormones. But if you don't feel good in your body and you suspect it's hormones, seek further help, right? There are always more options, and this is what I love to work with women with because our endocrine system is really, it's kind of right up there when I talk about the foundation of health, that it's our gut health. It's also our endocrine system, right? And it starts in the brain, but it works our way down to all of our endocrine organs, our ovaries, our thyroid, our adrenals, right? All of those things are related. Um, and so I will always encourage people, if you aren't getting the answers, continue to seek support. Yeah, there are a lot of doctors that practice a lot of different um, that no, they practice medicine differently. Sometimes it's the nuances. Um, and I think that when you look for a practitioner who is on, who you resonate with, or who is helping, yeah, guide you through, where your symptoms are coming from, how to support healing in your body, right? You're looking for that good fit. And if
Mhm.
it takes a couple of interviews, if it takes, a couple of meeting different doctors to find that person who fits. Um, I still think it's important to do that, right?
Yeah, with the caveat, like I will say this for you, with the caveat that that's if you want someone that you need to breathe the same air in the same room with.
Uh,
Like, yeah, keep interviewing. But the reality is that most of you guys at this point are accessible like wherever you live, right? Like you do Zoom calls, right? Like you,
yes,
so if you guys are resonating with Carmen, get it, book a call with Carmen. She doesn't matter where you live. Like we have clients in Canada, we have clients all over the US. Like she had, if there's availability and you fit with her, book it with her. Unless you're just wanting to breathe the same air in the same room with like a physician, like it's at this point, it's a moot point, right? Like accessibility is available.
that's true. That's true. Even with labs, accessibility is available. Yeah, for folks anywhere out of the state and in certain countries, even labs are available. And so, when we talk about, right, what to do to understand that hormone imbalance and what to do to address the fatigue, right, like the memory and the brain fog. I think a big piece of that is understanding how they're all related, and exploring, right, where your hormones are, whether that's symptomatically or whether that's via labs, to get a better understanding and a clearer picture as to where to start to address that hormone imbalance so that, yeah, we can feel better, we can show up the way we want to, with our family, with our friends, right, in the world. Um, because I think, especially with women who are driven, women who are high achievers, we have a tendency to push through a lot of times, right? Because we've, yeah, got the bigger picture in mind,
Mhm.
right? And sometimes we do that at the cost of our health because we don't know how to start to address that hormone imbalance, right? And so we always have a lot of options, and I'm happy to help folks explore those options and explore where our hormones are to begin to actually have sustainable, lasting results so that they actually have the energy to do the things that they have planned that they'd love to see happen with their family, with their life, yeah, with their businesses.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, perfect. All right. Um, if you guys are looking for support for hormone health and have just started to begin to explore, I'm happy to work with you. We do, on an individual basis, we do deep dives into exploring what hormones are out of balance, what fits your picture the best, and we create a road plan together to help to support those hormones and whether they're in excess or whether they're deficiency. Now, oftentimes I tell folks because we're complex human beings, it's usually not just one hormone that's out of balance because they're all connected with the endocrine system. And since they all start in the brain and that hypothalamus pituitary, oftentimes we do have some connections that are similar in we can address multiple hormones at once. So that's also why sometimes when we see changes or imbalances, it's not always just one hormone, right? And so that's why it's helpful, I think, when we put together a roadmap, we put together a plan to work together to begin to address all of those things, so that we can kind of feel better because it's the whole person, right? It's the your whole body. It's not just this piecemeal of we're just going to address the thyroid. Oh, well, I think I have adrenal fatigue. I'm just going to address the adrenals. Oh, well, I know my hormones are out of balance. Well, I'm just going to take testosterone or estrogen, right? Our body doesn't function like that. Our body doesn't function and pick out just one hormone that says I'm only going to work on that, right? Our body is very smart and it allocates its energy across the board to what is necessary in order for us to survive. And so when we offer support to the body and we look at, okay, what can we tweak? What can we change? What do we need to add? What do we need to shift? To support that balance level of energy, that balance level of allocation of energy to produce all of our hormones across the board, right? When they're in appropriate amounts, our body can be very efficient in creating health. And so that's what we explore.
I love it. Yeah, it's very powerful.
Yeah, thanks. All right.